2:07 p.m. was supposed to be a routine Friday evening flight. No passengers, no fanfare, just 3 experienced crew members, a full cargo hold, and a clearance for takeoff out of Louisville. 30-7 seconds later, a bell started ringing in the cockpit. It never stopped, and by the time the sun set over Kentucky that night, at least 14 people were dead. 2 of the world's largest shipping companies had made emergency decisions that hadn't happened in decades, and Boeing had issued a quiet recommendation that raised more questions than it answered. This is the full story of UPS's flight to 976, and the deeper you go, the more uncomfortable it gets. Louisville, Kentucky. A Friday evening in late October, the UPS Worldport Hub is one of the busiest air cargo facilities on the planet. More than 300 flights move through it every single day. Over 400,000 packages sorted every hour. It is, by every measure, a machine built for precision and routine. Nothing about that evening felt different. Nothing flagged. Nothing warned. Flight 2976 was a McDonnell Douglas MD-11, a wide-body freighter. Built in 1991, 33 years old, but not unusual for cargo aviation, where planes are kept flying long after commercial carriers retire them. The 3 crew members aboard were experienced professionals: Captain Richard Wartenberg, First Officer Lee Trout, and International Relief Officer Captain Dana Diamond. Between them, they had thousands of hours in the air. They had flown this route before. They had flown this plane before. At approximately 5:15 in the evening, Flight 2976 was cleared for takeoff. The engines spooled up. The aircraft began its roll down the runway. Everything, by all accounts, appeared normal. For 37 seconds. That's when the bell started. A repeating cockpit alarm. Steady, insistent. The kind of sound that doesn't allow for calm. Pilots are trained to identify alarms instantly, to run through checklists under pressure, to not panic. Captain Wartenberg and his crew did exactly what they were trained to do. They attempted to identify the problem. They attempted to control the aircraft, but something had already gone wrong that no checklist could fix. The left engine had separated from the wing, not failed, not flamed out, separated, the entire engine, along with the bulk of its pylon, tore away from the aircraft during the takeoff roll. Video captured from the ground showed flames running the entire length of the left side of the fuselage as the plane struggled to climb. Struggled is almost too generous a word. The aircraft reached a maximum speed of 183 knots. It climbed to roughly 100 feet above the ground. 100 feet. That is not flight. That is falling forward. The bell rang for 25 seconds. Then the cockpit voice recorder went silent. And this is where the story starts to get deeply uncomfortable. Because the question of why that engine separated and what happened in the month before that flight is something investigators are still trying to answer. And Boeing, the company that built that plane and issued the recommendation to ground the entire fleet, has said almost nothing at all. But before we get there, we need to talk about what happened on the ground. Because that part of this story is the part that most coverage rushed past. The aircraft did not come down in an empty field. It came down on people. Kentucky Petroleum Recycling, Greta Auto Parts, and Scrap Metal Recycling. 2 working facilities, occupied, active employees. Mid-shift on a Friday evening, who had no reason to believe that anything other than a normal night lay ahead of them. The plane hit. The explosion was immediate and enormous. 4 of the 18 buildings at Greta were destroyed outright by the blast. Fires spread faster than people could move. Doors at the recycling facility melted shut, trapping workers inside. Some employees broke windows and jumped. Others ran and helped shield co-workers from the growing wall of fire. The debris field stretched for half a mile. More than 100 firefighters responded. It took over 6 hours to bring the fires under control. Louisville. Metro Police issued a shelter-in-place order covering a 5-mile radius around the airport. Every public school in Jefferson County closed the following day. At least 13 people were confirmed dead by that evening. Then, late Friday night, Mayor Craig Greenberg announced that the remains of a 14th victim had been found in the wreckage. Among the dead was a child. 3 of those 14 were the crew of Flight 2976. Captain Wartenberg, First Officer Captain Diamond, they never had the altitude to eject, to divert, to do anything other than fight the controls for 25 seconds and hope. They did not survive that. Hope. But here is what happened next. And this is the part of the story that shifts everything. Within hours of the crash, before investigators had even finished recovering the flight recorders, two of the largest cargo airlines in the world made a decision that the industry had not seen coming. UPS grounded its entire MD-11 fleet. Every single aircraft immediately docked. The spokesman's statement was short and carefully worded. They called it a proactive decision made at the recommendation of the aircraft manufacturer. They said nothing was more important than the safety of their employees and the communities they serve. Hours after that, FedEx followed. 28 MD-11s grounded. Immediately, out of an abundance of caution, they said. Thorough inspections and safety reviews. Contingency plans activated across their air-ground network to massive companies, moving in near-perfect coordination, both pointing to the same source for the recommendation. Boeing. And Boeing said nothing. No press release. No technical explanation. No comment to the reporters who called the company that merged with McDonnell Douglas in 1997, that has been manufacturing and supporting the MD-11 for decades, issued a private recommendation significant enough to ground two entire fleets simultaneously, and then went quiet. That silence is not nothing. In aviation, when a manufacturer tells operators to ground a specific aircraft type after a specific kind of failure, it usually means they have a theory. It usually means the engineering data is pointing somewhere. It usually means they know or strongly suspect what happened. So, why won't they say? That question sits at the center of everything. But to understand why it matters, you need to understand the plane itself. And what was done to it in the weeks before that flight. The MD-11 is a three-engine wide-body jet. It first flew in 1990. By the standards of modern commercial aviation, it is old. Its design dates to an era before fly-by-wire controls became standard. Before the kind of digital redundancy that defines aircraft, like the Boeing 787 or the Airbus A350, it is a capable aircraft with a long service record. But it has also had a complicated history. Several high-profile accidents over its operational life. A reputation among pilots as an aircraft that demands precision and respect. Boeing announced back in 1998 that it was discontinuing MD-11 production. Final deliveries wrapped in 2000. The aircraft has been in a slow, managed phase out ever since. FedEx had already pushed its retirement deadline from 2028 to 2032, buying a few more years of service while new Boeing 767 and 777 freighters came online to replace them. Specific aircraft that became Flight 2976 was built in 1991. It was 33 years old on the day it crashed. In the month before that crash, it had been on the ground in San Antonio. More than 30 days. In maintenance, the nature of that maintenance work is not yet publicly known. Read that again. A 33-year-old aircraft, already scheduled for retirement, spent more than a month in a maintenance facility before returning to service. And within weeks of returning to that service, its left engine separated from the wing on takeoff. The NTSB has launched a full GO team, 28 personnel. The cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder have both been recovered. The investigation is active and ongoing, but the maintenance records from San Antonio are now one of the most important documents in that investigation. What was done to that plane? What was inspected? What was signed off? What was missed? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the questions that determine whether this was a mechanical anomaly or something that could have been caught, could have been prevented, could have kept 14 people alive on a Friday evening in October. Western Global Airlines is the only other U.S. cargo carrier still operating MD-11s, 16 in their fleet, 12 of which are already in storage. The type is being retired across the industry. The question being asked quietly in aviation circles, right now, is whether the retirement was already overdue. There is no clean answer to that question yet. What we know is this. 3 experienced crew members took off in an aging aircraft that had just returned from over a month of unexplained maintenance. An engine separated from the wing 37 seconds into the takeoff roll. The plane never climbed above 100 feet. 14 people died. 2 major airlines grounded their fleets overnight. And the manufacturer, the one company with the engineering knowledge to explain what likely happened, has chosen silence. That silence will eventually break. Investigations always produce answers. The NTSB will publish its findings. The maintenance records will be examined. Boeing will be required to respond. But here is the question that will still be sitting there when all of that is done. If the MD-11 was already being phased out, already aging, already scheduled for retirement, and if the maintenance history of this specific aircraft raises questions that haven't yet been answered,